And it was like somebody turned off a faucet. One day we got phone call after phone call after phone call. We lost like $60,000 worth of booked business in one day. Yeah, I mean, you have any idea how long it takes to book $60,000 worth of business? It's heartbreaking. Cruise ship season canceled. All the conventions are canceled, the shows, sports events, and I knew we weren't going to make it.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
This week, a prominent Seattle chef and restaurateur shares his deeply personal, heartbreaking tale of having to close his restaurants in Seattle. And he also shares what that has meant as far as a rebirth for his career at a small, out-of-the-way restaurant near Ellensburg, Washington, that he's using to reconnect our food system between those producing and growing food, those cooking it, and those eating it. His name is Kevin Davis, and this is the first time he's opened up about some of the things that went on behind the scenes with his restaurants in downtown Seattle and what happened when the pandemic hit, and just how devastating that was, but also how incredible that's been for him to change the trajectory of his career and his life. Enjoy this conversation today at Canyon River Grill with Kevin Davis. Also, I want to thank our sponsors, Mana Insurance Group, with locations in Washington, California, and Arizona, helping you plan for to protect your financial future rather than just pick up the pieces when things go wrong. Also, and that would apply in something like Kevin's case too. What is your plan for your business, for your life, for your home, your auto, to protect your family? That's a big question that Mana Insurance Group can help you answer. Also, Dairy Farmers of Washington, sponsoring the podcast, supporting what we do here, telling real stories of people growing food, raising food, producing food here in Washington State. And of course, they're all about the dairy farmers, and we share many stories of dairies here in Washington, along with Dairy Farmers of Washington, who do a great job of that at wadairy.org. So without further ado, we go to the banks of the Yakima River at Canyon River Grill and talk with Chef Kevin Davis. So the Canyon River Grill, what is this? This is an incredible place that I knew nothing about until, you guys connected with me and followed you on social media. I'm like, wow. And you invited me out to chat. Talk about what this place is and how this got started.
Yeah, well, it's pretty amazing. Actually, I've been fishing here for 20 years. And when I first got to Seattle, actually I came to Western Washington first, to Seattle area, to learn how to fly fish. I just kind of fell in love with the concept. I'd grown up fishing, and I was always into it. And fishing and foraging, those are the things that I wanted to have in my life.
Yeah. And
the third component was there had to be wine in a wine growing region. And I lived in the south of France, and I lived in Napa Valley, and my wife at the time, Teresa Davis, she wasn't really happy with living in Napa Valley, and
so that's where you had been prior,
right? Where we were living in St. Helena, and which was great for me. I mean, it's living in a small town, but still doing what I felt was significant, meaningful work as a chef.
Yeah.
And so I liked it a lot. It's a little too small town for her. So anyway, I said, well, I can go anywhere where these three things come together.
Yeah.
And that's how we settled on Seattle. And we moved to Seattle, and I just went out, bought my first fly fishing gear setup, knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
Even though I'd been fishing a lot, fly fishing is a completely different tangent.
Totally.
So it took me a while to really kind of just figure it out. But after a while of catching these little small east slope cutthroats, I discovered, or somebody told me about the Yakima River, and I came out here. And I remember going to Tandem Campground and catching my first significant rainbow trout, and I'm like, man, this is what it's all about. So I began to, in my free time when I wasn't cooking, and it's few and far between, but I would camp right down there in Tandem. And over a period of time, I met these guys, Steve Joyce, who was in a little fly shop here, and we just kind of struck up a friendship right off the bat. And then, as it turns out, a lot of my customers in my restaurants in Seattle were basically customers of Steve. And so we wound up actually doing this crossover fishing thing. And a lot of times people would want to have a chef when they're going fishing.
Right.
And they would invite me. And you know, so we kind of struck up a friendship.
Yeah.
A couple of years down the road, Steve said, "Hey, we're gonna open up a lodge here in this spot." Now, my first thought was, "No, please don't do it," because
Really?
it was my secret. This was like my secret spot. I didn't want anybody here. In fact, I wanted to come out here to be alone and have it all to myself. I mean, I truly was in love. I was smitten with this area. I mean, I don't know if you know it or not, but this is the only blue ribbon trout stream in Washington State. And it also reminds me a lot of my childhood. I spent summers in New Mexico, and it dovetails right into it. I just felt like I was home.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was kind of the beginning of the relationship. And then they also said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do a restaurant too." Now, at the time, I had been the chef of a restaurant in Seattle for 5 years, and I decided that I was going to open up my own restaurant, which was Steelhead Diner. So this was now 14 years ago. And so the restaurant was called Steelhead Diner. So it was like a magnet for fly fishermen. So if you like to fly fish and you're a chef, you know, all of a sudden I had all these customers that were right in my door. And I was right in the Pike Place Market. I had, you know, what I thought was the bounty of Washington State. And you know, I was always made my concept about that restaurant to be only stuff from the Pacific Northwest. The wine list was all Pacific Northwest. I tried to, you know, only sort local ingredients when they were in season, and I only used fish and seafood and meat from the Pacific Northwest. So I mean, it was in the genetic fabric of my restaurant.
Right.
And
this was Steelhead Diner.
Steelhead Diner.
Where was it?
In the Pike Place Market.
Nice.
It was right above where you know, the old Seattle's Best Coffee. Directly above it. And then I opened another restaurant called Blue Acre, and that was on 7th and Olive. And by that time, Steve had formulated this lodge, and it was in motion. And he said, "We're going to do a restaurant there, and we want you to give us a hand with it." And I said, "Well, I'd love to do that." And we were moving in that direction, and then the reality of being a restaurateur there, and all the obligations that you know, for time commitment that it took to run a restaurant, and being responsible for this restaurant coming back and forth, it just wasn't in the cards. So we said, "Oh, no, but we'll help you open it." And so I came in, I wrote the menu, hired the staff, brought all my staff over from Seattle. We trained their staff, and then, you know, kind of went back to the west side.
Well, when you're designing this, what was the intent? Like, how would you describe the restaurant?
I hired a chef, and I thought, man, I was like, wow, you have the Yakima Valley at your doorstep.
Yeah.
You have all these things. You could have, you know, you could have a garden here. You could source all your stuff just right over the hill. You could focus on wines from the Yakima Valley. You could focus on produce. You could focus on beers from the Yakima Valley, and all these things were in my mind. And we'll just kind of make a long story short of this part. But I did wind up opening 4 large restaurants in downtown Seattle, and a coffee shop. And things were going well. I mean, we thought we were in an incredible location. All of my restaurants were centrally located right downtown. 7th and Olive, right across the street from the convention center, basically next door to a 1,400-room hotel. The Steelhead Diner was in the market. I opened another restaurant right across from Blue Acre called Zane and Wiley's. And we were poised, and I thought to myself, wow, you know, things are really going our way.
Yeah.
This is perfect. You know, we're not bound by, you know, the economy or really anything. A lot of restaurants in neighborhoods have to deal with that. But downtown Seattle, you're kind of immune from it. You know, you always have Amazon at your back door. You have Nordstrom. You have Facebook. Nordstrom was in our building. So I thought, man, everything's going great. And then I heard about COVID, and it was just like overnight. You know, and I was like, what the hell even is a pandemic? I had no idea what a pandemic was. Yeah. And then, you know, I get the news, hey, they canceled Taste Washington. It's like, what? And then it was, you know, one cancellation after the other, and then we found out that Nordstrom and Amazon were sending their employees home indefinitely, and they were going to work from home. And it was like somebody turned off a faucet. One day we got phone call after phone call after phone call. We lost like $60,000 worth of booked business in one day. Yeah, I mean, you have any idea how long it takes to book $60,000 worth of business? It's heartbreaking. And at that point, cruise ship season canceled. All the conventions are canceled, the shows, sports events, and I knew we weren't going to make it. There was just no way. So we wound up having to close our restaurants, and it was one of probably the most difficult thing up into this point in my life that I would ever have to do, or you couldn't even imagine it weeks before.
Right.
And then I was staring it straight in the face. I mean, we were ground zero. My restaurants were ground zero, 7th and Olive. So I called up my friend Steve, who is the owner of the lodge, and I said, well, it looks like I'm not going to make it. And I just found out that because I'm the CEO of my company, I don't even get unemployment. I don't qualify for unemployment. I need a job. And he said, well, it just so happens our chef just resigned. And I had talked them into building an apartment upstairs for the chef. and
did you have it in the back of your mind that someday?
Actually, I did. I bought a property when I first opened Blue Acre here, and I had every intention to retire here. This was my place, and I did have every intention to retire here because I just actually fell in love with the Yakima Valley, and specifically this little portion of the canyon. And so, as it turned out, here I am. And it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when we were putting it together. I mean, we didn't ever wind up developing that property that we bought here. We actually sold it to open up our last restaurant, and so that never came to fruition. But here I am, and actually, I couldn't think of a better place to be. The Yakima Valley is everything that I hoped it would be, and it's everything that I wanted it to be, put it that way.
Yeah.
From being from Western Washington and coming to Eastern Washington, I like the open spaces, the people are real, and not to cast shade on anybody in Western Washington, right? Everybody's doing their thing.
There's a different vibe, though, and it's more low-key.
Yeah. And everybody has to do their own thing. But on this side of the mountains, I find things that I'm interested in right at my front door. I spent the last part of the year, even when we were closed during COVID, going out and meeting people, meeting producers, meeting growers, and doing a little interview, mainly just to get to know them and introduce myself to them. And so that one day when I'm, back up and running, that when zucchini's in season, they show up at my door, and when the real tomatoes are there, they call me.
And having that human relationship is so important. I mean, food is about people and relationship.
Well, yeah,
right?
It's and kind of everything. I mean, they call me if they have an event, or they need a favor, or they have some great product they want me to get a hold of, and vice versa. I use their product whenever I can. I feature it on my list, and also I learn every time I go out and do an interview, a little Instagram shot. I learn about what makes them tick. Yeah. And to me, that's just so interesting. I find it fascinating. The Yakima Valley is, as you know, it runs east-west.
Right.
And which makes it just this powerhouse of growing potential. If you can get water to it, right outside our back door, we have the Yakima River. If you can water it, it's going to grow. And I mean, everything, if you think about what we have here, not to mention just some of the finest grapes on the planet, and some of the finest wine comes out of Yakima Valley. You have everything from hops, some of the best beers you'll ever put in your mouth, to asparagus, amazing stone fruit, berries, mushrooms. I just spent a lot of time, well, this wasn't a great mushroom year, but I spent a lot of time kicking around the hills looking for morels, and found some.
Probably been too dry, right?
It was dry. Dry. I did have a little bit of luck, but, there's always next year, and then there's fall, and those are things that fascinate me. And then going into fall, I mean, I love to fish, but I'm kind of right centrally located between all the amazing steelhead fishing, trouts in my back door. There's chukar hunting. It's just, I mean, to me, it's just very exciting. Plus, one of the things that if you heard me mention, I said, well, hey, you could have your own garden here, because chefs fantasize.
Yeah.
I always fantasize about having my own garden and growing my own food, even the smallest amount, because in the city, it's not really that much of an option. There's not a whole lot of potential for it. You hear about these chefs, these lucky guys, one in each city has a rooftop garden that some billionaire, made for him. But those are really few and far between, or, Thomas Keller, who's got 15 acres or whatever. Yeah. I mentioned that to Steve, who's the owner here, and I said, hey, Steve, remember we talked about that garden? A week later, he had 5 raised beds, giant raised beds that he actually bought from a pot farmer. And they were lined up back there, and like a week later, they were fenced in, and I was growing. I had my first growing season last year, and I spent just every morning I'd wake up and go into the garden just to see, what's happening, and it changes every single day. And I mean, it blew my mind.
What does that feel like to work backwards? Because you're someone who knows food on like the very end. You take the stuff that other people have grown, packaged, processed, whatever, and you make the final art that gets served to people to eat, right? Yeah. But now you're working backwards towards growing it. How does that change how you do your thing?
The funny thing is there's a certain amount of pressure that goes with it, right?
Yeah.
Then I grow that thing, and it's all wilted and brown, and it has holes in it. What does that look like? People are going to drive up and go, oh, man, I hope that guy's a good cook. Let's go, honey. Let's go into Yakima. That's what I was worried about. But the first year it came up, and it was great. And, I actually had my garden over winter. I had certain things that actually survived the winter. Wow. It was a pretty mild winter, but still, I mean, I was harvesting arugula in March. And, it's satisfying when you give somebody something you grew. When you make a dish out of something you grew. Or if I need inspiration, I'll just walk out there. The other day I did some radishes. I had a whole bed of radishes, but I planted them too close together. But I had this dish going in my mind with this halibut dish, and it was really spring. It was, something that I was really, but I needed one more component. I walked out there, I'm like, these radish starts, they're not going to turn into radishes, but they're starts. And you pull them up, and they had these teeny little radishes on it, man. I was just walking around like a banty rooster, just to have that. And it's not big enough to provide a whole lot of food, but I'm getting smarter about what I plant to make sure that what I do plant, I could harvest and actually use for a whole weekend, and then come back and the next week harvest another bit, and use that for the whole weekend. So
kind of do a different feature thing week by week, depending on what's ready. Yeah, and it's still a puzzle to me. It's like, okay, there's your garden, go for it. I'm like, I'm from the city. I don't know how to do this. So I read a lot, and I watched a lot of Instagram and YouTube, and I get a lot of advice. I'm going to say there's a lot of people out in this valley who
they know what they're doing.
Decades at it together, centuries upon centuries of experience.
Yeah.
Growing, like anything, just about anything is grown in this region.
I know. It's amazing. And salt of the earth people, man. I tell you, the people they're just real and nice and want to help you. And, that's, to me, in this day and age, after going through, what we just went through, it's just been a breath of fresh air. It's a breath of fresh air. Every time I go out and I meet somebody, or I do one of those little videos or talk about something, a product, and these are the best thing about it is, like I've heard you mention, it's real. This stuff is real. I mean, you go out and if you taste a Yakima vine ripe tomato that's grown in season, you're like, this is just amazing. Peaches, stone fruit, cherries, berries, big, thick, jumbo asparagus, violet asparagus. You're just like, you just think about it the whole year. And it to me, there's always something hitting the market, and that's something that I don't think I'm ever going to get tired of. And as a chef, my menu changes. It can change daily. I usually write it on Thursday. I usually write it during the week in my head, and then I put it on paper on Wednesday, and then Thursday I start putting it together, and it changes, and it grooms a little bit depending on what now we're just starting to get into the meat of the growing season, and I was so happy when Fruit City opened up there in Yakima, because I love going there and seeing what they have, because whatever they have, it's going to be great. They've been sourcing there for since '65. So if it's on their shelf, it's probably going to be phenomenal. And plus, I get to go to Los Hernandez and get a bunch of tamales, take home back to the cooks, and share with the guys. That's always a treat.
Awesome.
So it's right across the street from there, and I'm just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
So if you're growing stuff in Yakima Valley, or you're producing wine, or you produce your beer, I want to meet you.
Well, I love what you're saying
on.
about that you were purposefully going out to meet producers. Not only are you sourcing local stuff, local food, local produce for your menu, for your restaurant, but you want to have that based on a relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people are longing for. That's why I'm doing this podcast, is to make that accessible. I mean, you're trying to, and you have the ability to do that as a chef, but to the average person who just buys food at the grocery store, they want to know, like, where does their food come from? Yeah. And so that's why we launched this podcast. So you're like exactly in line with where I am, to go out and have real conversations with people producing food, so we know what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're putting in our body. It's something that we enjoy as an art, as nourishment, so many things. It's kind of a big deal, and I don't want to just get whatever from wherever.
Yeah.
I want it from here.
Well, I'll tell you what, I guess my most important motivation is that, I'm starting over from scratch at 65.
Yeah.
At scratch, ground zero. And I don't have time.
Yeah.
I don't have time to, over the years, find out these things, find out who grows the best asparagus, or where are the best, huckleberries, where can you find the best morels? I don't have time. I need to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I've spent the last year and so much time trying to develop these relationships and explore and learn and try to figure out the best sources. And people will tell you, people will tell you they have pride in what they do, and they'll tell you, where to get it, where to find it. And so I'm extremely motivated because, I'm trying to build a great restaurant.
Yeah. Getting to know these farmers here in Washington State. I mean, beyond salt of the earth people, talk about what you're gleaning from them, getting to know about them as far as the care that they put into the food that they grow.
Yeah, so a lot of times I find farmers in my restaurant. And this one guy, I've been buying this Pence Farm peaches, Burt Pence. And I've been like a devotee of his for many years, because he was among the first guys that I guess under the advice of John Raleigh, decided to ripen his peaches to 19 bricks before he picked them.
Wow.
Because most everybody else picks their peaches green. And this was really novel, philosophy. And when I've been buying his, every year I buy his peaches, and I call up my produce guy. Okay, what kind of peaches does he have this week? What is he going to give me? Because it's like wine. Every year they're different, and every varietal is different. Same thing with cherries. And I didn't really know that. I didn't really understand it until, I guess until I moved to Seattle and I started getting these products from Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
And so not too long ago, I went, I saw a reservation. Last year it was when I first started. I saw a reservation. It said Pence. And I was like, I wonder if that's Burt Pence. And it was.
Awesome.
It was. And he's just, been the nicest guy. And he's like, come out to the farm. Same thing with my beef program. So Royal Ranch and Vantage. I started using these guys, and just because their product was exceptional. And then I met the ranchers, and they came in. And this was actually during COVID, and they're a Mormon family, very, it's just a big family.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, they have this farm. Not only do they do beef, but they do all sorts of vegetables. They do their asparagus. They do stone fruit. They do cherries. They're like all in one. And we had a dinner for their birthday, and I went into this. We had a tent outside, and there were 20 of them. It was kind of an odd experience because nobody was drinking. Normally you walk into a room like that at the middle of the night of a party, everybody's but they were all like, you know,
Yep.
but they were all so keyed in to what they did. I could tell it's just like it was just a family effort, and you know, I get a lot of enjoyment from meeting families like that and knowing that, you know, I can buy from Double R Ranch where they're killing 1,000 head of cattle a week, or I can buy from Vantage where they're killing 80. You know, it's a lot more care, a lot more attention. They know their animals, you know, and that's, to me, it's really important, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of things that people can't explain, a lot of diseases that people don't understand. I think you got to be really careful about what you eat. My philosophy has always been, since I started cooking, was I don't eat processed food. And I want to eat it as close to the source as possible.
Right.
I don't, you know, I don't want somebody else making it for me. And I don't want to be heating it up. I don't use microwaves. And I mean, I don't want to sound like a nut job, but
no,
I just don't.
I think more
don't
and more
believe
people
in it.
are thinking more about that. I used to not give that the time of day, and now that's becoming more a part of what I do with my food as well.
Yeah.
My struggle is how processed is, because really any cheese technically is a processed food because it's not milk anymore, but it's minimally processed, as compared to, say, what I like to call fake cheese, which I still have on my hamburger, but everyone around me.
Well, every now and then
you
need a good burger,
fake
right?
cheese on my
You need a good
hamburger.
burger. Yeah, and so one of the things that I do here is my restaurants were focused on seafood too in Seattle. Blue Acre was a seafood restaurant, and it was before that Ocean Air. So I kind of made that my specialty. And so for 20 years in Seattle, I was focused on all the seafood that was, you know, coming in. Throughout the year, I knew, you know, I had my sources.
Yep.
But and I thought that when I came here, it might be different. But I think we have a good system of how to get it here. And so I'm bringing this product, the very same product that I was using in Western Washington, in downtown Seattle, but you can get it here. So, I mean, like tomorrow night, we have sashimi grade bluefin tuna from Nova Scotia. We have black cod from Neah Bay. We have halibut cheeks. We have mussels, Taylor Mediterranean species mussels. I have Royal Miyagi triploids. I have jumbo Gulf shrimp, in addition to corbuta pork, prime beef. We have our own pastry chef. We do our own desserts here.
Man, I'm getting hungry just talking about this. That's
amazing lineup. So I think people are enjoying it. People are enjoying it, and I think it's been a great way to get to know people in Yakima and Ellensburg. You know, a lot of times, I think this place was a destination for Westsiders, affluent Westsiders who wanted to fish. And the restaurant now, I think, has been a reason for people in Yakima and people in Ellensburg, to come and to feel like this is their place. This is their place. This is where their stuff is. This is where they can get their beer that they made. This is where they can get the wine they made. They can have it.
It's like full circle community. Then the people who are growing the food, preparing the food, enjoying it all together. There's a certain full circle, like, wholesomeness about that.
Yeah, no, it's good, and I've been cooking since, I guess my first real chef job was in '91, but no, actually '89 I was a chef of a restaurant in South Australia.
Wow.
And so I've been a chef continuously since 1989, and I think that what we offer is real, just like they are, just like the product that we're serving. And
how did you become a chef? Like, what was your journey to that point?
That was kind of, I don't want to get into a forever story, but actually my mom died when I was young, and my dad figured the best way to hold the family together, because it was just him raising the family. I had a brother and a sister, and so his way to hold the family together yet teach us our own self-reliance was to teach us how to cook. But actually, he didn't teach us how to cook. He cooked on Friday and Saturday, and we had to cook the rest of the nights.
Yeah.
And each kid had 2 nights. And so, you came home from school,
Yeah.
football practice or whatever, you had to cook dinner. And
You have a bit of motivation at that point because you're hungry.
That's right. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good.
Yeah.
So by the time I got out of high school, I already had a good idea of how to cook. My grandmother was from South Louisiana. She held the whole family together with her recipes. I mean, she was an excellent cook. And she was kind of like the godfather, holding the family together with her chicken stew. It was like people would worship her. They'd go and have an audience with her after the end of the meal. I began to associate, believe it or not, food and esteem and power through that. It was just an odd thing, but
well, and there's a culture that embraced that way back,
right.
Louisiana,
and she was
Cajun
like
cuisine.
revered, if not worshipped, for her ability to cook it for a whole family, and like several families, and so
that had to be formative for you, to be like,
well, it was.
That's a big deal.
I know.
I aspire to that.
Yeah. So I didn't understand that I wanted to be a chef, but I knew I could cook. And so I went to college. I decided I wanted to major in literature and in the arts. And my dad said, who's, very pragmatic person, said, well, you can do that, but you're going to have to pay for it. I want you to be in business. I'll pay for a business degree. So I fumbled around college for a couple of years and, never really found anything that excited me. Business at the time bored me. And but I got a job in a restaurant at the World's Fair in 1984 in New Orleans. And man, I was like a kid in the circus. I knew I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the whole excitement, the atmosphere, every night it's the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat. Really, you live it. And I don't know, maybe I have ADHD, I don't know. Maybe I have a short attention span, but it just suited my personality.
Yep.
And so I took to it very well. At some point, I decided to move to South Florida. And I kind of stumbled into a job at a restaurant called Max Luna, and I was just transported because I was working with a world-class chef, Charles Saunders at the time, and in a really fine Northern Italian restaurant, brand new in Boca Raton, and it just hit me like a brick. I'm like, I could do this. I could do this. And I could express my creativity. I could be an artist. Yeah. I could make a living doing this, and I could be good at it. And that was it. After that, I kind of just, I said, okay, well, what do I have to do to be a chef? At the time, people didn't really go to school, only a few and far between. I met a couple of people from this place called the Culinary Institute, but I didn't really know what it was. It was just apprenticeships. So I decided to have to go to France. So I had a job as a chef in, I would have been 19 years old, 20 years old. And I had a job as a chef in this dinky resort in Isla Morada. And they had a place for me to live, and they were paying me in cash. I saved all of my money for 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, I sold my car and moved to France.
Wow.
And I was with a friend of mine who was a pastry chef at a restaurant I was working at. She came with me. She wanted to move to France also. And she said, yeah, I know somebody who knows somebody in the south of France. We could probably get jobs. As it turns out, this person knew a person named Monsieur Abella, who owned the Abella Corporation, who also owned several hotels, one in Cannes and one in Nice. And the hotel that he owned in Cannes was the Grès d'Avion, which was home to the chef Jacques Chibois, who that year was the chef of the year in the Gomio Guide. He was it in France. And that was just sheer luck. That was blind luck. But, I always say, it's life is kind of like, it's like a fruit tree, you just have to reach out and grab it, but you got to grab it, you can't be afraid to do it. And that's how we got there, and we did our apprenticeship, and at the end of 6 months, 7 months, kind of ran out of money, because it was an unpaid stage. Yeah. But I worked in Nice with Gerard Ferry and Jacques Chabois in Cannes, and it completely changed my life. I mean, I had traveled before, we lived in Singapore when I was a kid, so I had this wanderlust already, this world travel. I wanted to travel. And so we moved back after the stage. She went to St. Helena, and I went to New Orleans. Well, I got a job in a kind of a famous Creole restaurant called Arnaud's, and I began to really, kind of re-embrace my Creole Cajun, heritage, and it was really easy for me. I think I felt like I did really well, and soon I was promoted to sous chef. But I knew I'd never be the chef because all the chefs before me had been old and French. They were like 50 years old. Here I'm 56 now, but they were like old and French, and I'm like, but I had this great relationship with the owner. She moved to St. Helena. She got a job at Trevigny. Try to speed this up, but I after about a year, I said, I'm never going to be the chef here. I answered an ad in the paper for Adelaide, South Australia, chef of a Cajun Creole restaurant. And within a month, I had a working visa, and I was in Adelaide.
Wow.
And so that was 89. After a year, the owner of the restaurant of Arnaud's called me up out of the blue, and he said, hey, the chef here has resigned, and we want you to come back. And so that's how I got back to New Orleans, and I was a chef there from 90 to 96. And meanwhile, my friend was in St. Helena. After about 5 years, I kind of felt like I was stagnating. I always use the analogy, I was a blues musician, but I wanted to be a classical musician.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be famous for something else. I wanted to do something else. And so one day I called her up out of the blue, and I said, I'm thinking about moving to California. And she said, well, we have a position open here as the executive chef at Trevigny, executive sous chef at Trevigny. And I applied for it, and I got it. And at the time, I knew nothing about Italian cuisine. I mean, I'd been to Italy,
right,
and I loved it, and I'd learned it. I'd worked in an Italian restaurant before, but I mean, not to that level. And so it was just like a, warp speed.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what brought me to the West Coast. Then after a couple of years, as I said, Teresa didn't like St. Helena that much.
No.
I wound up in Seattle.
So much background that then all goes into your art, too. All these different influences.
You got to pay your dues, man. You
Yeah.
got to pay your dues. And you see my menu, every day it changes a little bit. I don't change it full scale, but I change 2 or 3 dishes every day. And they're kind of my repertoire. Like, for example, when artichokes come in season, this is my artichoke dish every year, and it's only going to be a week or 2 that I'm going to have them, but that's the dish I do. And every year when, for example, when salmon and Bing cherries are in season on the same day, I do that dish every year. And I just roll through my repertoire of 30 years, my greatest hits. That way I keep the mistakes to a minimum. That way, I keep the failure to a minimum. People have expectations, especially now. They have pretty high expectations when they're coming in. They're coming in for a reason. So, but it's good. I mean, I would never consider myself at this point, even though it seems like I'm changing all the time. I'm not experimental. I like to go with what works. When I do a dish, I want people to go, "Wow, that was the best best hamburger. That was the best piece of salmon I ever had. That was the best piece of, the best salad." That's what I want to get from my customers. I'm not trying to educate them. I want them to just enjoy this dish as the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going for.
How much are you able to have local produce, meat, seafood, any of that in what you serve here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's what I focus on. So, obviously, up until now, this point, this year, there's not a whole lot growing. No. But now we're starting to get into the season, just so far, as soon as asparagus hit the shelves, local asparagus, I was there. And, goes right into green beans, cherries, apricots. All those are within, a stone's throw, not really a stone's throw, but a couple of miles from here, grown, and sometimes not even refrigerated. Mm-hmm. I'm getting them just right out of the ground, right? Yep. And then, so we're looking forward to, I'm growing my own tomatoes out there. I got a pretty nice crop. I got a feeling when they come online, we're going to use them up quick. But I use, I go right into, so like I said, we're featuring this week local green beans. Yakima Valley Farm brings me the lettuce. She does hothouse lettuce and arugula and farm raised chicken eggs.
Yep.
So I got farm fresh eggs on all my dishes, and I also rely on her for herbs and kale salad. So I kind of have that area covered. All of my seafood comes directly from Seattle, and I try to focus, especially depending on what's in season. And it just changes, and I have 20 years experience with that.
Yeah.
Kind of just knowing what's in season and when we should be using it, when it's going to be at its peak. I never use farm-raised fish, and I never use frozen fish unless it's absolutely necessary. Like, for example, if there's an inclement weather week or something and I had to use a previously frozen at sea piece of king, well, I wouldn't have a problem with that, or shrimp. But apart from that, everything else is fresh, and I focus on that. And the way this restaurant's set up is we're open Thursday through Sunday. So basically, we start over brand new on Thursday, brand new.
And it gives you a few days to reconfigure and get the next ingredients if you're constantly revolving through what's fresh at that
and
time.
Plus, refresh your mind. Sometimes when you're open 7 days a week, it's you get ground down. But when you get 2 days off and then 1 day to kind of put it together and start thinking about it, and it's just, in my opinion, it's a luxury as a chef. I enjoy that lifestyle that I never had really before. Yeah. I mean, when you have 4 restaurants and 190 employees, it never stops, man. When that phone rings, you get nervous. You start sweating. look down that phone, your hand starts shaking. What is it? It could be anything. It could be anything. Yeah. So I will tell you, my friend, I don't miss that. And that's not my life and my work is not about money, and it became more and more real to me this year.
Yeah.
It's about being happy. I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that right now.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people are seeking out experiences like this restaurant right now too. I don't know what you think about the, kind of the American culture value on everything always being the same. You can go to the grocery store and you can find every ingredient available all the time. Doesn't matter where they get it in the world. Go to a restaurant and they have the same menu. It's always the same thing, and it's got to taste the same way. And I think people are stepping back from that and starting to realize maybe that's not actually what we want.
Yeah. I will tell you, I get a sense that people are rethinking their lives and their values like never before. Never before in the history of America have people had a year to step out of the grind and think about what they're doing and who they are and where they're going. And I tell you, I will speak for myself, it scares the shit out of me. And I have the clock ticking in my background, and I'm thinking to myself, what is the rest of my life going to be like? Starting today, really, start over, okay? Reset, press the reset button. What is the rest of my life going to be? And now I have a chance to make that decision and make the rest of my life. I mean, before, we're all in a grind. We're going in a direction. We're swung.
You're on those rails. Right? You got to keep on going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now I've had the reset button pressed for me, or it got pressed, and now I start over, and I have a chance to shape my life and make it what I want it to be. And if it's not what I want it to be, then I have nobody to blame but myself.
Would you call that a silver lining of the pandemic and the devastation of having to close your restaurants in Seattle and all of that? Or would you describe it differently than that?
It's a tough way to describe it, but you get it. It gave me a new chance to start over again. And I would say in one hand, great tragedy, but on the other hand, I'm going to be stronger for it. I'm going to have a better rest of my life. I'm going to appreciate it more. I'm going to make more of it. I'm going to make more of the time that I have. Yeah, absolutely. I hate to intimate that it would be that, but yeah, I have no choice but to make the best of it. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to make it something.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to make something happen. I don't have any choice. It's just got to.
There's a lot of wisdom in that, and I do feel it's, for a lot of people, more than just a silver lining. It often gets called that, but to me, and maybe it's just semantics, but silver lining denotes like, well, it was mostly bad, but at least there was one or two little good things. But in some ways, yes, it has been an awful time, but out of that adversity, I think, you know, your story, and I've heard so many stories of people who have rebirthed their, you know, careers, their life, their lifestyle, all because of this time that we've gone through.
Well,
it's huge.
I'll tell you, I think my story is no different than a lot of people, but I feel like the last couple of years have been some incredible growth in adversity, some really hard things, some really painful things, but those are the things that make you know you lived life, that make life beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, it may not feel great when you're going through it, but you look back and you go, that made me who I am. That. And I you know, I should be thankful for that hardship, that what I had to go through, because it made me who I am. It helped me, you know, become a stronger person. And that's not the way I look at it. That's the way it is. Yeah. It's just not, I'm not trying to cast a good light on it.
Put a good
it's
spin
just
on it. Yeah.
True. It's true.
Yeah.
And every experience that you go through is like that. They're beautiful. You thank the Lord that you're able to experience them now, no matter how hard they are.
Exactly.
Because they make you who you are.
Thank you for sharing all this wisdom and your story. And thank you for doing what you're doing here. I'm always thanking farmers for the food that they grow. You're another piece of that puzzle to make it all work, to take that food the next step, you know, really turn it into art and feed it to nourish people, entertain people, and build community. And then you're coming around the backside as well, not just this one-way street where it starts with a farmer, ends with a consumer, and there are people in between, but then you're going back to the grower and bringing this full circle. And so thank you for that focus too. I think we desperately need that in so many more restaurants, stores, in different parts of our food system for us to get to where we really need to be.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And, you know, I have said this before, but this is where I'm going to finish it up. So when you want to find me, this is where I am.
Awesome.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.